Hi, Liam O'Gogan here. Welcome to another episode in the series of the research program Does It Matter? I'm recording this video on the 6th of May 2016. I'm very mindful that I have not yet produced some of the other videos in the chronological sequence in which they should be produced, but at the moment I'm just reacting to events as they're occurring, again with my limited resources. So this particular video arises out of an intervention that's now been made to me by the Data Protection Commissioner. So where we start is 2 days ago on May the 4th I received the following email. You can see here the date here at 15:17 from Data Protection, DPC breaches at dataprotection.ie, and it was signed by a Paula Forde, Senior Compliance Officer. So it came unannounced to me. Now, if you go back and look at the earlier video of my phone recording of a conversation with Magella Lysett from the 29th of April, at that time Magella stated that the CSO had put their hands up and that they had reported the breaches of data to the data protection people. Now again, in speaking to Magella, I have to say that one might say I was somewhat better informed but none the wiser as to actually what had gone on, because there's a query in my mind in relation to what actually had been reported to the Data Protection Commissioner and why I hadn't been informed by the CSO, particularly in relation to, there's 2 different breaches. There's the breach of my personal data, which, as if the CSO are to be believed, my personal data has been thrown out there without an awful lot of securitization at all into snail mail, original documentation, some of which, and therefore which is now lost and is conveniently not available for any interrogation or analysis. And so that's and that includes quite a breadth of material about me personally, and I would regard as having reputational negativity for me. And the other is their breach of the personal details of all of the candidates that attended that interview. So my understanding of that conversation, again, it's there in the timeline to be scrubbed back to see exactly what Magella said about that they had reported both of these breaches. So I had presumed, well, if you're reporting it to the data protection, why aren't you telling me about it? So I'm really wondering what's going on here. So I get this email, and in a sense I am confused. So I just want to look through briefly essentially what this talks about. So it started, I wish to acknowledge receipt of your email dated the 24th of April 2016 regarding a purported data breach. So at this point I was saying, my email, have I reported the data breach? I couldn't remember doing that, and I'll leave that because I've had to obviously trail through the correspondence in relation. So that was something I needed clarification about. I wish to confirm this office is now in contact with the CSO in relation to this matter and would like to thank you for bringing it to our attention. So again, as in with past stuff, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to interpret this. Am I wondering here, as a result of this purported email that I sent reporting the breach, did the data protection make contact with the CSO, and as a result of that did the CSO put their hands up, or did the CSO proactively come forward and put their hands up and say, we're bringing this to your attention, data protection, because we're good guys and we want to clarify it? And of course I have doubts about that, because if that was the case, how would the chief statistician for the CSO, Deirdre Cullen, be continuing to pronounce publicly that the CSO have never ever released anybody's personal names, addresses, details, PPSN numbers, etc.? And again, all that material is available in this stream of YouTube videos carrying the original references, and you'll hear Deirdre Cullen say those words. So I was wondering about that. Then this went on, it says, this office notes, however, instead of returning the data which you received in error to the data controller CSO or destroying or deleting it, you have published it in a format that can be rendered readable on a number of websites. Well, that's interesting, this idea of a number of websites. When I see that, what's a number of websites? Just think about that. We'll come back to that later. This publication on your part has resulted in the public disclosure of the personal data of the individuals listed in the document. So again, I can sort of see the winds of change coming towards me here now. That let's rain on this guy for a while, just to be clear, by the way, the document that I've put up on issue.com is a complete catalogue of the correspondence that I had with the CSO in relation to the whole process of the interview process and the appointment and evaluation for census enumerators in West Donegal, and the resultant attempts by me to have a proper professional independent investigation of the fairness and completeness of that process, and the repeated loss of information, mishelp, whatever that I've experienced from that there. But the reason that I published the video on the 24th of April 2016 on YouTube was because that was the day of the census have to be filled in, and it was essentially, I was trying to circulate as widely as possible a public warning about the fact, which has persistently been denied and contradicted by Deirdre Cullen, that the CSO may and have on this factual occasion in that same time frame actually release people's personal data. And for me personally, I have lost my trust as a result of a practical experience in the securitization of my data, which is supposed to be guaranteed for all of us. The privacy of our data is supposed to be guaranteed for 100 years. I do not believe that based on my experience. So I was bringing this information into the public domain. That was the purpose of my doing that. The rationale for me producing the access to the original data that was breached not by me but by the CSO is that in the light of the relative credibility that we both bring to the table, me, an ordinary Joe Soap citizen, a pensioner, trying to just hack it with limited resources, against the might and the right and the power and the perception and the quality assurance standards as repetitively listed and underpinned in the value proposition as presented by the CSO, and the reality in a modern world of the Reagan view of trust but verify, and the doubting Thomas principle of wanting to put your hands in and actually see the data. It was important to me that I could establish beyond a reasonable doubt that this statement that I was making about the release of the data, and particularly mindful of the fact that Deirdre Cullen continues to repeatedly stand over the belief that the CSO have never released people's public information, public data. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play that clip. Okay, here's Deirdre Cullen. Just listen to the jocular certainty that comes in her voice.
We've never given anybody's name and address or anybody's identifiable information to any other body or agency, including Irish Water.
So there you are, folks. That's factually incorrect as my data. So that's the reason I put this data up there and provided originable, traceable, auditable evidence to that data. That was my rationale for doing so. And I have persistently since then, and in dialogue and in reference communication, and all the evidence will show that, stated to the CSO that my wish is to take these individuals and their details off the table. Because they're not relevant to my discussion whatsoever. I harbour no ill will or anything towards those people. I've never met these people. I don't know them. My issue here is that I have offered that I will remove this data as soon as the Director General of the CSO sends me an email in which he states officially, without caveat, that the CSO have broken the law, have breached this data, and so therefore I can put that information back into the documentation as a placeholder for future retrospective analysis of this material further down the years, when people look back and they'll say, this guy was just making it up. He didn't really have the evidence. The evidence is there, and I need, if I'm going to blur that evidence, I need to put that in place with a placeholder by the people who have broken the law to actually take full responsibility in relation to that. So that's the context of this. Anyway, moving on. Under these circumstances, the office advises you that you immediately remove from the various websites on which you have posted any personal data which you do not have consent to publish, including any individual's name and any direct or indirect reference to that individual from which they could reasonably be identified. So that's a very broad sweeping statement, just to tell you there. Like, I've published a lot of stuff and a lot of times over a lot of places to a lot of people, both direct on websites, and again, I think as we'll see this, it's not, we're actually talking here about posting stuff here on social media platforms such as YouTube and Facebook particularly, and putting the reference data into another platform which is called issue.com. So in a sense, they're not my personal websites per se. I'm so distracted trying to do this other stuff that I really need to get back to the longer term plans, which to develop for myself a comprehensive website to establish all this material and pull it all together in a larger sense around the overall project, which is called Does It Matter? In addition, you should note that this office is now in receipt of a complaint from one of the affected data subjects regarding the publishing of their personal data by you on a number of websites. The fact that the original disclosure of this personal data may have occurred as a result of a breach on the part of the CSO, note this, may have occurred. May have occurred. This is really interesting. So, I've been told by Magella we put our hands up. I'm wondering, how far have they put their hands up? Is this a half-hearted, excuse me, sir, may have occurred? I mean, sorry, there is no issue around the fact, at least the data, the evidence that I've been presenting in these series of videos and in the collated and published documentation is this disclosure did occur, in fact could only occur as a result of a breach on the part of the CSO. So it may have occurred as a result of a breach on the part of the CSO, as the data controller does not exempt you from responsibility to now comply with the Data Protection Act. So the problem for me, there's another question, saying, what exactly is my responsibility in relation to this, and what does complying mean, etc. So I needed to get clarity in that. So it said this office would be obliged if you would remove the documents at issue immediately on receipt of this correspondence in order to avoid enforcement action having to be contemplated against you in order to rectify this matter. So I'm playing this piano, guys. It's like, don't shoot me, I'm only the piano player, the image of one of Elton John's albums many years ago. So now I'm going to have enforcement. This is like one of them drug guys, the enforcers. I'm going to have enforcement action against me. So going back to this, because the CSO may have occurred as a result. So the CSO may have done something wrong, but we're going to enforce something against you. So I'm left in a situation here that I have a lot of questions that I want addressed. And so I'm looking at Paula Forde, Senior Compliance Officer of the Data Protection. So again, I get a phone number here. God, am I now breaching Paula Forde's data? This really gets interesting as we think about this. Anyway, this is a public official, folks. And what I'm going to play for you is a phone call, or a recording of a conversation I've had with a public official carrying out her public function. Okay, so let's see if we can pull this video or pull the audio onto the screen and start this process of just reviewing that phone conversation and what that means in relation to SIM. So the first thing, let me just bear with me while I'm doing this, because I'm trying to pull on screen many different resources. Okay, I've had just a bit of a delay pulling this material on screen here. So this one here, this is a call. So I called that number 057868 4800. That's a public number, folks. That's not a breach of anybody's secrecy or whatever. So I called this number, and so I was asked to speak to Paula Forde, Senior Compliance Officer.
Gurth Mahagus Osplay occur or ifig on Commissioner Custom the Sunri. Thor Linta Galer go no hook láthir. Fan no me the hull, August Frag Rofer the Hui, the rare Uniachta. Thank you for calling the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner.
So you can see there we're in the waiting business. So just move along to, obviously somebody must have come on stream here.
Customs under Data Protection, how can I help you?
Hi, could I speak to Paula Forde, please?
Can I ask who's calling, please?
Liam O'Gogan's the name.
You couldn't possibly just spell your surname for me, could you?
It's Gogain.
Gogain?
Correct.
Okay, bear with me 1 second.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Now I just want to make a point at this. I'm ringing an official body here. I'm asking to speak to someone, and I recognise this as another fractal of behaviour that happens, and I'm just going to reflect on this. I've been asked my name and personal details, identify myself and spell my name, etc. And I'm asking to speak to someone. I believe I'm well within my rights. They've said, look, I'd prefer to stay anonymous at the moment, because lots of reasons you might be calling all these bodies, you don't want to give that name and detail. But it's a really interesting thing. It's obviously a strategy to extract that data from the person at the front end. I mean, certainly a friend of mine who's in the sales business would say that's one of the sales technique. Make sure you get the data from the other person. Your job is to find out all about them, not about them finding all about you. So, look, and I was aware of this, but I said, look, I don't have a difficulty, but what I do have a difficulty, wait a second and we'll put you in contact with this person. So I presume that with these modern info systems, just press a button, bang, bang, somebody's either available or they're not. And if you look at the length of the timeline along here, this is something in the region of a length of 4 minutes 51 seconds. So just looking at this section here, that's 4 minutes and 51 seconds, nearly 5 minutes, right? But what's happening during that period of time is just, I'm just sampling into this. So essentially, I'm just listening to this endless, solid spam canned music. While I'm waiting for 5 minutes for this person, Paula Forde, to emerge after giving my detail. To me, in the overall scheme of what's going on in the world of dealing with officialdom, I throw this in as a relevant piece of information. You know, there's a 5 minute period. Was this person not available? Should someone have come back to me and say, okay, look, at this person available at the moment? Or what's going on? So there is a 5 minute period there, so that Paula, whoever I'm going to talk to now, will have an opportunity then to presumably set up their files or whatever. You know, and in the dynamics of suspicion that arise through all of this, or in what I call a low trust society, which, if you're interested in looking at why I'm doing all this, if you go off and look at my ISO Halo videos about trying to rebuild a high trust society, you will perhaps get to realise why, you know, people get into this analysis that I've got into. Anyway, let's what happens when the little music stops.
Good morning, Paula Forde speaking.
Hi, Paula. Liam O'Gogon is my name. I received an email from yesterday. Could you contact me back, phone me back on 087 2543 997, please?
2543 997. Yes, that's
okay,
no problem.
thank you very much. Okay,
now.
thanks, right. The next time we're going to go to, just kill that section of audio and just bring in the longer conversation. This is when Paula rings me back.